Welcome to my channel. With you, Paul Meenan. Today we're talking about family conflicts that can go too far. Family feuds, a dragon mother-in-law, and a snake daughter-in-law with a poor guy caught in the middle. Brenda Peterson, a woman whose name alone sounded like a death sentence for all living things, stood frozen in her meticulously polished living room. Her face, usually resembling a fixed mask of noble indignation, now wore an expression as if she'd been offered to live in a chicken coop on the top roost in the company of a particularly foul-smelling rooster. Her lips, usually pursed into a perpetual thin line, were slightly parted, revealing a set of meticulously cared-for, yet no less predatory teeth. Her gaze, typically sharp and piercing, slid over her daughter-in-law Olivia as if she were some exotic, never-before-seen insect. "What are you, you little tramp? My Jimmy, a gardener?" Brenda Peterson hissed, and the air in the room seemed to thicken with her venom. She, Brenda Peterson, whose lineage, by her own account, traced back to nobles and magnates, whose apartment gleamed with surgical precision, and whose son James was her one and only masterpiece, raised with love and the strictest control. And now this Olivia, with her simple smile and overly bright blouse, dares to suggest her Jimmy work as a gardener, and at their country house, no less, where she, Brenda Peterson, deigned to visit only on grand holidays, and even then with a heavy heart, fearing to dirty her shoes on rural mud. Olivia, seemingly oblivious to the brewing storm, beamed. Her smile was wide, sincere, and it made Brenda Peterson want to strangle her with her own cashmere scarf. "Yes, that's right, Brenda Peterson," Olivia chirped, and there wasn't a hint of mockery in her voice, only a sincere, almost idiotic politeness. "Leo and I have a large yard. In autumn, the leaves just pour off the trees. The wind blows it all into the yard, and then there are the flower beds that need weeding and little things here and there to touch up or repaint. In short, there's a lot of work, and Leo and I simply can't keep up. And Jimmy, he's so strong, so hard-working. We just thought—" Brenda Peterson felt the pressure in her temples reach a critical point. She was ready to explode, to tear this insolent girl to shreds, but then her gaze fell on James, her son, her flesh and blood, her precious Jimmy, sat on the edge of the sofa, hunched over like a frightened rabbit, staring intently at his shoes. He was 35 years old, and for the past 15, he had been unsuccessfully trying to find his calling. This calling, as a rule, was limited to finding new excuses for his idleness and squandering his parents' money. His last permanent job involved creating an innovative startup for delivering air to mountainous regions, which, like all his previous ventures, failed with a spectacular crash.
And now, when all her attempts to secure him a cushy job in some respectable office had been thwarted by his pathological unwillingness to work, this Olivia, the wife of her younger son Leonard, was offering Jimmy, her firstborn, her pride, a job as a gardener. This was an unprecedented insult, a slap in the face, a humiliation that could not be washed away. Are you mocking me, girl?" Brenda Peterson grated, and her voice suddenly dropped so low that it seemed even the crystal chandeliers vibrated. Olivia, completely unfazed, merely shrugged. "Oh, Brenda Peterson, what mockery! On the contrary, Leo and I are thinking of Jimmy's well-being. After all, he's currently, well, you understand. And this way, he'll have some steady work. And we'll pay him well. 30,000 a month, plus food, plus lodging. We have a guest house that's empty, quite decent, with all the amenities." 30,000, plus food, plus lodging. This was more than James had earned in his entire previous career. Brenda Peterson involuntarily pondered. Of course, a gardener was a disgrace, a stigma. But on the other hand, Jimmy would at least be busy. And a whole 30,000. She could save it for something useful, for his future, truly worthy business. And most importantly, he would be supervised, under her control. After all, she could always visit him in the guest house and make sure he hadn't completely fallen into laziness. A whirlwind of thoughts swirled in Brenda Peterson's head. On one hand, pride screamed about the unacceptability of her son's downfall. On the other, common sense whispered about the benefits of a regular income and some kind of occupation for her wayward offspring. And still, somewhere deep inside, a small, nasty worm of suspicion stirred. Something about Olivia's generosity wasn't right. She was too benevolent, too smiley. Brenda Peterson knew that behind every wide smile lurked a dagger, and that dagger, she was sure, was intended for her. But for now the offer was too tempting to simply refuse. After all, there was always a way to extract maximum benefit from the situation, and perhaps even teach this presumptuous daughter-in-law, who, in her opinion, was taking too much upon herself, a lesson. Wait, Olivia. Brenda Peterson finally found her voice, and it was no longer as piercing, but rather suspiciously insinuating. You say, a guest house with all amenities? And food? And 30,000? And does Leonard know about this? Does he agree to such expenses? Olivia nodded, her smile unwavering. Of course, Brenda Peterson. Leo himself came up with all of this. He really wants to help Jimmy. He is his older brother, after all.
This was the last thing Brenda Peterson expected to hear. Leonard, her younger son, had always been more independent than James. He had achieved success on his own, built his own career, married this Olivia without asking his mother's permission, and now he, her youngest, was offering such generosity to her Jimmy, and without her knowledge. Brenda Peterson couldn't bear it. A feeling of possessiveness, wounded pride, and jealousy mixed within her into a volatile cocktail. Well, she said, carefully enunciating each word, that is, of course, noble of you, but I must consider everything. This is a very serious decision for my son, and I will not tolerate him being used as cheap labor. Olivia merely tilted her head, her smile not fading in the least. We understand, Brenda Peterson. Think about it, but keep in mind, this offer won't last forever. Brenda Peterson escorted her daughter-in-law to the door, feeling a fire of indignation ignite in her chest. She sensed that Olivia was up to something cunning, something sly. But what exactly, and how to fight it? She, Brenda Peterson, was an experienced woman who had been through fire, water, and the copper pipes of family disputes, and she was sure she would expose this Olivia. And if she didn't, she would definitely get revenge. After all, no one dared to encroach on her Jimmy, her only, her unfortunate, her perpetually unemployed, but so beloved son. She was already anticipating how she would make this Olivia regret her insolence. For this was not just a job for Jimmy. It was a battle for influence, for power, for a place in the sun. And Brenda Peterson was ready for it. She was already imagining how she would control James's every step, how she would tell Olivia what to do, how she would mete out justice. She was sure she could turn this humiliation into her victory. The decision was made. After 3 days of agonizing deliberation, tossing between pride and calculation, Brenda Peterson, with a heavy heart and gritted teeth, gave her ultimate permission.
James was going to Leonard. He was going to work as a gardener. And this, in her deep conviction, was merely a temporary humiliation, a sort of springboard from which her priceless son, having strengthened himself physically and morally, well, at least physically, would soar to unprecedented heights. The main thing was control. She needed complete and unconditional control over the situation. Olivia, upon hearing of the agreement, rejoiced. No, not like that. She smiled, that same idiotically benevolent smile that so infuriated Brenda Peterson. "That's wonderful, Brenda Peterson," she chirped over the phone. "Jimmy can move in tomorrow if he likes. We're expecting him."
And so, the day of the move arrived. Brenda Peterson personally inspected the contents of James's suitcase, making sure there were warm underwear for a gardener's job, as he'd surely be forced to shovel snow, and vitamins, so he wouldn't wither from unaccustomed labor. And even her homemade meatballs. What if this Olivia fed him something unsuitable? She gave her son $1,000 for small expenses, reminded him 20 times to call her every evening, and 30 times not to let Olivia get away with anything. The guest house turned out to be surprisingly decent. Not a palace, of course, but clean, cozy, with its own bathroom and even a small kitchenette. Brenda Peterson snorted. Well, at least they didn't skimp here. Apparently their conscience finally awoke. James's first day on his permanent job began with a joke. Olivia, handing him new gloves, a shovel, and a rake, said with a serious expression, "Here, Jimmy, your tools, and here's a list of your duties." The list was impressive. Sweep the yard, gather leaves, weed the flower beds, wash the garden paths, water the lawn, clean the pool, for heaven's sake, the pool, care for the rose bushes, take out the trash, shovel snow in winter. Brenda Peterson, if she had been there, would have immediately thrown a fit about slave labor. But James, surprisingly, just scratched his head in confusion. And all that every day?" he stammered. Olivia laughed good-heartedly. "Oh, Jimmy, of course not. Today, for example, you need to collect the leaves around the house. The rest is as needed. The main thing is that the yard is always clean and tidy. And yes, tomorrow the gardener will come and he'll show you how to properly prune the roses. Also, we need to fix the gate. It squeaks. You know how to fix things, right?" James, who had only ever held a gaming controller in his life, nervously swallowed. "Well, I can try in principle." Thus began James's labor epic. For the first few days, he, as was his habit, tried to shirk. He swept haphazardly, raked leaves into piles and left them until the next day, watered the lawn, forgetting the flower beds. Brenda Peterson called him every evening, interrogating him with bias. "Well, Jimmy dear, didn't overwork yourself? Are they feeding you well? And Olivia isn't bothering you with extra chores?" James mumbled something incoherent, trying not to reveal the extent of his idleness. But Olivia proved to be far more perceptive than Brenda Peterson had imagined. She didn't scold James, didn't lecture him. She simply documented every shortcoming, every unfinished task. And when it was time for payday, she, with that same benevolent smile, laid a printed list of fines on the table before him.
"Here, Jimmy," she said, pointing to the lines. "You didn't collect the leaves on Monday? Minus 100. Didn't weed the flower bed by the gazebo? Minus 150. Forgot to clean the pool when guests came? Minus 300. And so on. In total, your salary for this month amounted to $1,000. James was stunned. How only 1,000? I was promised 3,000. Olivia sighed. "You were promised, Jimmy,
on condition that you fulfill your duties. And you, unfortunately, are not fulfilling them. But don't be discouraged. Next month you have a chance to improve. Here's a new list of tasks, and remember, every completed task is a plus to your salary, and every uncompleted one is a minus. And it was then that James finally realized the hopelessness of his situation. He, a mama's boy, accustomed to comfort and idleness, suddenly found himself in a situation where he had to work, and work honestly, to earn even a meager penny. Brenda Peterson, upon learning of the fines, unleashed hell over the phone. "What kind of outrage is this?" she shrieked. "I'll show them for hurting my son. I'll come down there and give them what for." But Olivia, after listening to her tantrum, calmly replied, "Brenda Peterson, we had an agreement. James is an adult. If he wants to earn a salary, he has to work. Those are simple rules. Or do you want us to pay him for doing nothing?" Brenda Peterson, to her own horror, found herself speechless. After all, she herself had always taught James that money comes from hard work. And now, when her own son faced this truth, she couldn't openly object. All she could do was hiss into the phone, "This is all you're doing, Olivia. You just want to humiliate my son, but I won't let you get away with it." And she truly didn't let it go. Brenda Peterson began visiting Leonard and Olivia's country house almost every day. She walked around the property like an inspector, with narrowed eyes, searching for dust, unraked leaves, unweeded weeds. She gave James valuable instructions, scolded him in front of Olivia, and tried to control his every move. "Jimmy dear, you're holding the rake wrong," she lectured. "You need to rake the leaves like this, with a wide sweep. And Olivia, what are you looking at? You could help him, since you're so generous." Olivia, as always, merely smiled. "Brenda Peterson, I'm at work, and I have plenty of my own things to do. And James, he's a man. He can handle it. Right, Jimmy?"
James, red-faced from exertion and shame, just mumbled something incoherent. He finally began to understand that he was trapped in a situation where he had to work, not just pretend to be busy. And worst of all, he began to understand that Olivia wasn't just smiling at him for no reason. Behind that smile lurked a cold, calculating mind that methodically, step by step, was dragging him into the quicksand of real labor. Brenda Peterson, observing this, felt cornered. Her plans to control the situation were going to hell. James, though working, did so with an expression as if he were being forced to eat lemons. And Olivia? Olivia just watched, smiled, and shrugged when Brenda Peterson tried to catch her in a trick. "Brenda Peterson," Olivia said one day, seeing her mother-in-law watching James from the guest house window with binoculars, "you're so worried about Jimmy. Maybe you should join him. Fresh air, physical activity. It's so good for your health. I can give you a separate broom and a salary for cleaning the guest house kitchen." Brenda Peterson immediately paled, then flushed with indignation. She, a lady of distinction, being offered to wash floors and sweep the yard, this was too much. "Are you out of your mind?" she shrieked. "I, Brenda Peterson, for me to—" "Well, as you wish," Olivia shrugged. "I just thought you might be interested. After all, you love cleanliness so much." It was at that moment that Brenda Peterson realized this battle would not just be tough, but truly sophisticated. Olivia hadn't just imposed work on James, she was also managing to taunt Brenda Peterson herself, pushing her to the limit. Laughter, pity, and righteous anger, all of it boiled in Brenda Peterson's chest, but only self-pity and anger at this cunning daughter-in-law. What would happen next? How would Brenda Peterson extricate herself from this web? Or rather, how would Olivia pull her even deeper into it? Brenda Peterson returned home after another inspection of the country property, seething with indignation. Olivia's plan, as it seemed to her, was transparent as a baby's tear. To humiliate her, Brenda Peterson, to force her son to work like a common laborer, and all the while constantly taunting her by suggesting she take up a broom herself. It was inconceivable. But what to do? She couldn't leave Jimmy to the mercy of this predatory girl. To pull him out would mean admitting defeat, and Brenda Peterson did not tolerate defeat. And then it hit her. A brilliant, truly diabolical idea. If Olivia wanted James to work, he would work. But not just for nothing, but for the benefit of Brenda Peterson. After all, if Jimmy was cleaning the yard, he was actually creating cleanliness and order. And cleanliness and order was a resource that could be monetized.
She, Brenda Peterson, had always been an enterprising woman. In her youth, while her friends waited for their husbands to come home from work, she engaged in small-scale speculation, procuring scarce goods and selling them at a markup. These skills had not withered with age. They merely awaited their hour. And now that hour had come. "Jimmy, darlin'," she exclaimed into the phone that same evening, and new, dangerous notes resonated in her voice. "I have wonderful news for you. We're starting a business together." James, who had just been scrubbing some green grime from the pool, nearly dropped his brush. "A business? What business, Mom?" "A very real one," Brenda Peterson declared solemnly. "Ours, a family one. Look, Leonard and Olivia have such a large property, and it's always so clean. And there are many such properties in our neighborhood, and people need help maintaining them. You're a professional gardener now, Jimmy darling. You know how to clean properly, how to weed, how to prune roses." James felt a wave of nausea. He, who barely cleaned his own yard under duress, was now being offered to clean others? But his mother's voice was so convincing, so inspiring, that he involuntarily succumbed to her energy. "Well, I don't know, Mom," he mumbled. "You do know, Jimmy darling, you do," Brenda Peterson cut him off. "And I'll handle the marketing. I'll put up ads all over the neighborhood. Professional yard care, fast, high quality, inexpensive, private contractor. And we'll charge money for it, from $300 to $500 per yard, depending on the complexity. And all the profit, Jimmy darling, will go to you. Well, minus a small commission, of course, for my organizational skills." James, hearing about $300 to $500, suddenly brightened. This was far more interesting than Olivia's paltry $100. "Really? All for me?" "Well, almost all," Brenda Peterson clarified. "And Olivia and Leonard, they won't even realize. You'll be working in your free time from their work. Or you'll tell them you're just working extra hard for them so they don't find you." The plan was so daring, so audacious, that even Brenda Peterson felt a thrill of excitement. She immediately set to work. She posted ads, called acquaintances, spread the word. And, to her surprise, business picked up. The demand for a professional gardener was high. People, seeing Leonard and Olivia's well-maintained yard, believed that their Jimmy darling was indeed a master of his craft. James, under his mother's careful guidance, began traveling around the neighborhood, cleaning other people's yards. At first he grumbled, cursing everything, but then, seeing real money, he began to get into the swing of things. He even started buying new tools, work clothes, and, oh wonder, even began to show initiative. "Mom, what if we buy a more powerful lawnmower?" he suggested one day. "Then I can finish faster and take on more jobs." Brenda Peterson almost teared up with tenderness. Her Jimmy darling, finally awake, finally taking responsibility. She was already imagining her business flourishing, how she and Jimmy would buy a new apartment, how she would boast to her friends, "My son, Jimmy darling, is such a successful entrepreneur. He made his own way." But Olivia, as you may have guessed, had her own opinion on the matter. She, of course, noticed that James began disappearing for half a day, returning tired but satisfied, and was regularly receiving calls on his phone. And one day, passing by the local bulletin board, she saw it. She saw this advertisement: professional yard care, fast, high quality, inexpensive, private contractor. And beneath it, James's phone number. Olivia merely smirked. "Well, well, Brenda Peterson," she whispered to herself, "you're digging your own grave, and I, for one, will help you." She said nothing to James or Leonard. She just watched as Brenda Peterson swelled with pride, as James mastered new skills, as money flowed into their pockets. And she waited for the right moment to deliver her counterblow, a blow that, she was sure, would be devastating. For revenge is a dish best served cold, and Olivia knew how to prepare such dishes. And Brenda Peterson, in her blindness, had completely forgotten that you don't dictate terms in someone else's house, and that sometimes the simplest solutions turn out to be the most effective. What would Olivia come up with? What would be her revenge for this audacious act by her mother-in-law and her entrepreneurial son? Prepare yourself, my dear, for the climax is near and it promises to be truly shocking. The business of Brenda Peterson and James was thriving. James, initially grumbling, now eagerly took on new orders. He learned to use a lawnmower, mastered a trimmer, and even began to understand rose varieties and their pruning times. Physical labor unexpectedly gave him a rosy glow on his cheeks and a sparkle in his eyes. He started sleeping less during the day, eating more, and even began talking about opening his own LLC. Brenda Peterson was over the moon with joy. Her Jimmy darling had finally found himself, and he was making good money too. Olivia, meanwhile, still just smiled. Her smile, it seemed, had grown even wider, even more enigmatic. Brenda Peterson saw it, but paid it no mind. Well, she's smiling, so what? Probably envious of her son's success. Minor details. And then the day came when everything exploded. One morning, as James returned from another job, he was met by Leonard, his brother. In Leonard's hands was a sheet of paper, and on his face an expression James had never seen before. It was a mixture of weariness, disappointment, and a strange, unsettling determination. "Jimmy," Leonard said quietly, "we need to talk." "About what, Leo?" "About your work and our agreement." And then Leonard laid out the bills before him. Bills for water, bills for electricity, bills for gasoline for the lawnmower that James had so happily bought with communal money, bills for tool wear and tear, for using the guest house, for everything under the sun. It turned out that Olivia had meticulously calculated every penny James had spent using their resources. She documented every fill-up of gasoline for the lawnmower, every drop of water used to water other people's properties, every kilowatt of electricity spent charging the batteries for the trimmer, and even the depreciation of the shovel and rake. "Jimmy," Leonard calmly explained, "you're working for us for $3,000 a month, receiving lodging and food. And all this time you've been using our resources, our property, our reputation to make money on the side. And for that, my dear brother, you have to pay." The amount at the bottom of each bill was staggering.
It far exceeded the tens of thousands dollars James had been receiving from Brenda Peterson for his business. But how can this be? James stammered, his face as white as a sheet. Mom said,
Mom said, Leonard interrupted him. But Mom forgot that everything has a price. Olivia calculated all of this. She's very thorough, you know. And then came the most significant bill. The bill for emotional distress. For using our reputation, Olivia explained, appearing from behind Leonard with that same smile. For our home becoming a thoroughfare for your clients, for Brenda Peterson constantly lurking here like a supervisor, and for you, Jimmy, betraying our trust. The amount on this bill was astronomical. It was so high that James felt the world spinning before his eyes. Not only had he not earned anything, he was now in colossal debt to his brother and his wife. Brenda Peterson, upon learning of this, rushed in like a fury. Her shouts shook the walls of the house. "This is robbery! This is fraud! I'll sue you!" she shrieked, waving her arms. Olivia, as always, remained unperturbed. "Brenda Peterson," she said calmly, "we have all the evidence. Receipts, call logs, testimonies from neighbors who saw James working on other properties, and, most importantly, we have a contract that you, by the way, personally signed agreeing to James's terms of employment. It clearly states that he must work exclusively for us and is not allowed to use our property for personal needs. If you wish, you can sue, but I'm afraid you'll also have to pay court costs." Brenda Peterson fell silent. Her fighting spirit instantly withered. She realized that Olivia had outmaneuvered her. She had won cleanly, without any criminality, but with such sophistication that even she, Brenda Peterson, felt like a complete fool. The resolution was both shocking and absurd. James, to at least partially pay off his debts, was forced to continue working as a gardener for Leonard and Olivia, but now without any side businesses. He toiled from dawn till dusk, trying to pay off his debts as quickly as possible, and, to his own surprise, he got into it. He became a truly good gardener. He cared for Leonard and Olivia's property as if it were his own, because now he understood. The better he worked, the faster he would pay off his debts, and the sooner he would gain his freedom.
Brenda Peterson, humbled and broken, no longer appeared on the property. She called James, but no longer with demands, but with plaintive lamentations. She socialized less with her friends because she was ashamed to admit such a fiasco. Her business plan had turned into a complete failure. And the worst part? She saw how her Jimmy darling, her wayward but so beloved son, had suddenly matured, grown stronger, and become independent. And this was not thanks to her, Brenda Peterson, but to that clever Olivia. Olivia, watching James, his diligence, his changes, finally allowed herself to smile genuinely, without any ulterior motive. She had achieved her goal. She had taught her mother-in-law a lesson, showing her that cunning and intelligence always triumph over audacity and ego. And James got what he needed: a job, responsibility, and, strangely enough, self-respect. So there you have it, my dear reader. The story of how a daughter-in-law taught her mother-in-law a lesson ended in a way no one could have expected. Laughter, pity, and righteous anger, I hope you experienced all of it. And, of course, were shocked by the unexpected resolution. Because in life, as in a good book, the most interesting twists are always just around the corner.